and I'm in the dance track.
Yes.
Sweet. Thank you. Cool. I can pray for you guys now.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, God, we want to thank you just for Kelcey and Gabby and the words that they're about to speak to us, God. We want to ask that you'd give them your wisdom and you'd give us hearts to listen and hear what you have to say, God. Yeah, we just want to bless them in your name. Amen. Awesome.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about teamwork and relationships today. For me, I think this is such an important teaching, to be honest, especially if we're going to be planning to work in ministry with other people, not just for your time here with your DCS. When you guys are all together, this will be helpful for you. But I think this is something that goes just beyond, a DTS. We need to be able to function well in teams and work well with other people. Our whole lives in everything that we do. For me, it's definitely something that is important that we talk about. And before we jump into it, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or if we're just going to go for it.
I think we should just go for it.
Cool.
We have a lot to get through.
Yes.
In our short amount of time. So
yes. Cool. So we're going to be kind of hitting a few different points of things that relate with relationships and teamwork. And the first thing we kind of want to cover is the topic of love and what that actually looks like. So could we have someone read John 13:35 for us? We've got quite a bit of Bible reading today, so be prepared.
I can read it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. 13:35.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It states that by this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another.
Yep. And to be honest, something really, really sad about this is I feel like we see the world actually loving each other so many times, so much more often, we see the world loving each other better than what we see the church actually loving each other and loving on people. And actually in John, it's very clearly stating that people should be able to recognize whether or not we're Christians by the way that we're loving. They should be able to relate us back to Jesus and see, they've understood love, they've received love. We should be giving out that same type of love that we've received. And I know there's so many things that, block this and prevent this and prohibit it and stuff, but so many times it's also that we don't even actually try or put in the effort, or we can't be bothered. Just a small example, my brother, he in high school got into a lot of not great things. And basically the reason he ended up getting into all the different things that he got into, with some drugs and stuff like that, was essentially because those were the people that seemed to accept him and embrace him more than the people that were actually Christian that he initially wanted to be part of, and it's so sad that it's like this, but typically we find that people who are more broken are more willing to open their arms and receive other people who are broken. And they're typically the people that tend to have the most grace. And as Christians, we need to realize that we're broken people, just because we're Christian doesn't mean that we're perfect, I think that's really the heart of being a Christian, is actually recognizing that we're not perfect and that we need grace. And so just as a whole, this is one thing that people should be able to recognize in us when they look at us and they see us working in teams and functioning in teams. They should be able to recognize the way that we are loving each other, the way that we're embracing each other. And that should be something that also inspires people and invites them in. As Christians, we can't be exclusive people, and we can't be saying, okay, but you can't be part of us because, of all of these things. Something that I really, really love about our church here in London that we started is it's not it's more uncommon, I think, to have a Sunday service where there's not a homeless person with us than there is to have services where there's several of them, because they've recognized that we're happy for them to be a part of us, even though they're not perfect, even though they're struggling with tons of different things. It's just different things than what we're struggling with. But for us, that was something that was such a victory to see that they felt like they had a place and that they do have a place with us. And that's something that I love so much, because what kind of Christian do we want to be? Do we want to be people who are willing to embrace and receive others? Or do we want to be people that are exclusive? yeah, and a lot of times we see churches and Christians being exclusive, and yeah, we can't be like that. And another point that I want to make about love is that it's not a question. Love is a choice. Love is something that we need to choose to do. It's not a feeling. It's not some idea. It's not a fluffy, romantic, nice thing. Love is a choice. And sometimes love is hard. You know, that just is what it is. It's not going to be an easy thing for us all the time. I think growing up, I always just thought it was kind of like this little fluffy thing that, like, and as well, you need to earn it, and both people are giving and taking and all of that. And yeah, like, you know, love does have those aspects in it, but at the same time, when things get really hard, you need to choose to love people. It's always a choice. If someone's really, you know, grinding your gears or really getting on your nerves, you still have to choose to love them. You still have to choose to embrace them, and you still have to choose to walk with them. It's always a choice. And yeah, the reality is in teams, we're not actually always going to get along, and we are going to see things in different perspectives than other people. But at the same time, that's also something that's super cool, because that means that we're able to actually learn from other people's perspectives. And we're able to, cover more ground, I think, as well. A good example is like me and my husband. We are literally night and day. We cannot be more different. You know, please find me 2 more different people on this planet and I will applaud you. But the reality is the 2 of us together are able to cover more ground because we see completely different perspectives. But that also means that a consequence of that is there's going to be more often times where we're like, but I think this, and, you know, you clash a bit. But at the same time, even in those moments, you need to choose to love the other person anyway. And to choose to see that maybe, okay, what they're saying is actually valid, and maybe there's some truth in that. Maybe I see things a bit differently, and maybe there's actually more to the picture than what I've just got here. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that I want to, like, have you guys, that's the thing that you should be writing down, is that love is a choice. Because we always have a choice in whether or not we're going to reject someone or if we're going to embrace them. So.
Yes. The next thing about love is that with it being a choice, is that we also have to choose to celebrate each other, and not just in like I don't know, like, yay, it's your birthday, like that's important, but also seeing that, like, when you're working in a team with other people, or when you're in relationship with somebody, their victory is also your victory. We kind of see the world in this like comparison way where, like, if you win, then that means I can't. And that's not true. That's completely what the world sees. And that's not how God designed it. You know, it's like when Paul talks about the body of Christ, all of them work together. You know, if one thing is hurting, then everything is hurting. If one thing is succeeding, then everything is succeeding. That they can't operate alone. They can't operate without the others. And it's the same in our relationships, that we have to see the success of one person, or like one, maybe one part of the ministry or one event, or, you know, whatever it is. We have to see that as something that all of us can rejoice in. And it's not easy. Like, maybe somebody, maybe like both of us are struggling with our finances, and she gets 1,000 pounds donated to her, and I'm still in debt 500 pounds. And I'm like, why would she get it and I don't get it? You know, why does she get the donation and I don't? But that's comparison, and that's, you know, that's stealing from it. When actually I could be, you know, rejoicing with her that, like, she got a huge donation, and like, that's such an incredible blessing. And then, you know, when God provides for me, that she can do the same. And it, you know, it takes us out of ourselves and our selfishness. And yeah, helps us to realize that it's not all about us. Yes. So the next thing, I'm going to give you a minute to finish writing, is that love is the foundation. Love should be assumed, but it also shouldn't be assumed, if that makes sense. It should be the foundation of any like team or relationship that we're in. but that doesn't give us the excuse to not be expressive with it. So we always, we need to look for ways to show our love to people, to show them that we care about them, that we notice them, that we value them, in our team. We need to demonstrate love so well that it's never a question, that there's never a doubt of, whether you love somebody or whether somebody loves you. And that also means that it's different for each person. We all give and receive love differently. And that comes with understanding and getting to know people, and, being intentional with paying attention to them and seeing, because I'm not going to try to love Kelcey the same way that I love her husband, Joel, because they're different people. And I have a different relationship with Kelcey than I do with Joel. So it would be weird if I tried to show affection to them the same way. It would make all of us uncomfortable. And, and it's a simple example, but it's true in many things. But also, if I never even tried to show either of them that I loved them, it would also be weird, because we've known each other for a long time and we do a lot of things together. So if I had no love for either of them, we'd have a problem. So yes, it's there and we know that it's there, but we still need to be intentional and put effort into showing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, this is a really good example with that. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to throw Joel under the bus the whole day. Whenever he teaches you, just, don't tell him, it's fine. No, actually, he knows that I do this all the time, so it's fine. But just a little example to kind of build off of that is, for me, we are married, so I assume that he loves me, But if I don't tell him that I love him for a day or two, he starts to be like, you don't even tell me that you love me anymore. And I'm like, I'm married, what do you want? And he's like, well, some reassurance sometimes would be nice. And I'm like, oh crap, I don't think about the fact that that's what he needs, because for me, the reassurance is that we're still married, so I assume things are fine. And if people don't tell me that something is going wrong, I assume that nothing is going wrong. That's just kind of how it is. If you don't tell me there's a problem, I assume that there's not one. But for him, he's a type of person that he needs more of that, regular just checking in and, not reassurance in a way. Not that he's doubting whether or not I love him, but he likes to have that reassurance, or he likes if you check in a little bit more often and things like that. And so we can't just assume all the time, because if I'm just assuming all the time that he knows that I love him, then I'm sure maybe we'll probably start to doubt that after 2 weeks of me not reminding him. So, these are areas that I can recognize I have room to grow. So speaking now from experience. But yeah, another really important one is that we should always try to assume the best in each other. I think this one is such a key thing, especially because it affects the way that we see the people that we're working in teams with, the people that we're friends with. If you're in a relationship with someone, it all is going to affect, if we're willing to assume the best about them, then I think we'll have a lot fewer conflicts. There'll be less criticism among you, less gossip, a lot less things like that. Because, if you're assuming the worst in people in every situation, then automatically you're just going to criticize and put them down and tear them down. And you might not ever actually find out, say, for example, someone is 20 minutes late to the teaching. We can either assume that they just went and didn't care about our time and went to go and grab a coffee and, left the house 20 minutes late, whatever thing. We can assume, this about them, and then they get here and we're all really critical toward them. Or we can assume maybe something happened with public transportation and it didn't work out very well that they ended up late, But if we assume the best, when they arrive, our attitude toward them is significantly better than if we've assumed the worst. And again, it's like this in literally every single aspect of your life. And I know I keep talking about marriage, but it's going to help you a lot later on then as well, because you need to constantly assume the best. in others. And to be honest, I hope that people would assume the best about me as well, you know? I would hope that people aren't assuming that I'm just trying to waste their time when I show up 20 minutes late, you know, to the lecture, or, I don't know, if one day I'm coming home at midnight, I would hope, you know, that who all would assume that I'm not just like, like living my best life and doing whatever, and wasting his time. Like, it's one of those things. I think when we assume the best in each other, it really helps to have our attitudes towards each other better. And it really helps us to have, I think, more trust in each other as well. And then, of course, you know, it's good to address things, not just assume that no one's ever going to do anything wrong, but like, you know, actually have a conversation with them. Hey, like, just checking in, you know, why are you 20 minutes late? Is everything okay? And then actually find out, you know, because for me, like, if I think about I need to assume the best in people all the time, then I would think that's the fast track to allowing people to just walk all over me and do whatever they want. And there is a fine line, you know, we shouldn't just be stupid about it and let people run free. You know, we need to be accountable as well, but there's a way that you can approach them and have a conversation with them about it. That's going to be very different if you're assuming the best than if you're assuming the worst. So does that make any sense? Yeah. Good. We came out of another teaching that's been happening since 11:30. So I feel like I'm just going in circles because I'm like with that and this one all in my mind. So if I ever don't make sense, please, please, please tell me, because I want this to make sense for you.
I'll try to clear it up for you.
Yes, thank you.
But our brains are like,
yeah, we've been in the same place, so we're yeah. Yeah, and something else that I really want to touch on with kind of along the lines of assuming the best in people is recognizing that even if, you know, what they were doing at the moment was not the best thing, God still doesn't deal with us as like the way we are now. He sees us as who we can become, and he always sees the potential in us. And so assuming the best about people is something that's also going to go hand in hand with actually being willing to look at their potential and not just look at all of their shortcomings. It's so easy to look at people's shortcomings, guys. Like, honestly, it's a lot easier to look at people's shortcomings and their failures than it is to actually step back and take a look at the potential that they have. I don't know if it's like that for you. For me, at least, it's like that. I think for most people, to be honest, it's like that. I see a big nod from Kevin. I like it. But yeah, that's how it is. You know, I think sometimes want to protect ourselves from being hurt. And so we want to just see the worst in everybody straight away so that, you know, we don't get our hopes up and then they let us down. But we need to assume the best in people, and we need to see the potential that they have, because it doesn't look at you as all of your failures. He looks at you as who you can become. And I've got a verse actually that I want to talk about as well in Matthew 16, verse 18. Would someone mind finding that and reading that out for me?
I got it.
Thank you.
Said Matthew 16:18.
Yep, that's the one.
Sweet. It says, "And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it."
Yes. In the version that I have, it says that, now I say that you are Peter, which means rock in the side as well. And I really like that that's actually what his name means. But the really funny thing is, like, this is the way that Jesus looked at Peter, you know? And at this time, Peter was not doing the greatest things. And I mean, for me personally, like my whole life growing up, I knew Peter as the disciple that would deny that he knew Jesus, you know, before the rooster crowed like this many times. And Jesus wasn't looking at Peter like that. You know, he was looking at Peter as who he could become and as who he would become. He was looking at the potential that was in him. And he was saying, you know what, we can use this. We need one of you. And yeah, I think for me, that was such, I don't know, that just hit me in a really, really strong way when I first realized that, because I was like, who am I then to think that I get to go around and judge and criticize people, when God is looking at me as who I can become. And he's looking at me as all the things that he's placed inside of me that maybe they haven't even come to life yet. But God knows all these different gifts and virtues that he's put inside of us and that he wants to grow in us. And we need to be able to acknowledge those things within each other as well. You know, we're going to fail. You know, the people in your teams are going to fail. Your leaders are going to fail. We're literally people. It's going to happen, you know? But we have a choice as to how we respond to that. And we have a choice as to whether or not we choose to love through that. And we have a choice as to whether or not we're going to walk with them through that and help them to be like, to reach that potential that God placed inside of them. Yeah, there's always something good in other people. It's just a matter of whether or not we're willing to look for it and whether or not we're willing to challenge them to grow in it as well. This doesn't mean that we should, you know, let people on our team constantly just repeat the same mistakes again and again and again. Like, we need to have healthy confrontation with them. Sometimes we're going to need to call them out, because love is also confrontational. Love is not just being a doormat, but, you know, we have a choice as to whether or not we want to go into that difficult process and actually walk with them through it and help them to reach that potential. Yes.
Yes, so we've kind of already touched on this, but basically, at least I am, maybe you're not, in which case, good for you. But we are like professionals at like criticizing and judging and finding the faults in things.
Got another big nod from Kevin.
Yay!
I like it. Very responsive. I relate, me too.
And I find this especially for like detail-oriented people, or people who like see the, you know, we see the things that maybe could be better, or that could be done, or like maybe you just have strong opinions and like, this is the way that I do it, so you should do it this way as well. But I think it's really important to remember with these things that all of the times that we are judging or criticizing someone, it's coming from our own perspectives, our own opinions. It's coming from us. And, you know, our heart is totally different when we're approaching somebody that maybe made a mistake, and when we're coming at it from the love of God and the truth of God. Those two things are totally different. Our attitude is going to be different. The conversation that happens is going to be different. And yeah, usually when we're like just like judging somebody, we feel it. Like, you know in your heart when you're just judging someone, even if you're judging someone based on like, you know, something that is like said in the Bible or whatever. Like, first of all, that's usually coming from religiosity. And that's like what the Pharisees did, is they're like, all these laws happened. So like, you know, they were said, so we have to follow them perfectly. And if you don't follow them exactly how we tell you to follow them, you are wrong, and we will judge you for it. That's not the love of God at all. That's not the purpose of the law. That's not the purpose of rules. It's not, we make these rules so that we can sit there and judge you when you get them wrong. Yeah, so that's was not in my notes. Yeah, and we also sometimes think that it's like our right when we become a Christian, or we grew up in a Christian family or whatever, to like judge other people because we're like, well, you're not a Christian, or you haven't like had this part of your life fixed yet, so you're worse than me. Yeah, and that's a whole other problem and teaching in itself that we're not going to go into today. But yeah, basically that's all a lie. So yeah, whenever you catch yourself in that like mindset or that thought process, like, yeah, definitely go back to God, because we're all guilty of it, that's for sure. Like, it's not like anyone doesn't judge other people. We all do it because we're all proud. So yeah, can't really escape that one. But yeah, it's something that we have to, like, especially, you know, when trying to be with another, like in any relationship with another person, you're going to see things that they're doing wrong, and they're going to see things that you do wrong. And if you don't take that judgment, that criticism back to the cross and back to God to like heal in your life, yeah, it's only going to get worse and worse, and it's going to like really ruin your relationships. yes, and with that is also letting go of self-righteousness and what we think we deserve, because you don't deserve anything. Everything that we have is given to us by grace and by grace alone. Yeah, we don't earn any of the love, any of the blessings, yeah, any of the, I don't know, I can't think of anything else. Anything we have not earned it. It's from God. It's a gift, and yeah, it can also be taken away like that. And that's important to remember when we're like, you know, judging other people, is that we're just as, not just as bad, but like we are just as unholy as everyone else. You know, we're just as unrighteous. We are only seen as righteous in the eyes of God because of what Jesus did. Yeah, there's a parable in Matthew chapter 20. It's quite long, so I'm not going to have us read it, but maybe you're familiar with it, and if you're not, you can go and read it afterwards. It's Matthew chapter 20, and it's the parable of all of the workers who were like called into the field at different times of the day, and then at the end of the day, the owner of the field, whatever, gave all of them the same amount of money. And he, like, before the workers like came, they all agreed on a price, on a payment for the end of the day. And then the ones that were there from, like, let's say 8 a.m. got really annoyed and, like, you know, upset that the other people that came in at 5 p.m. that they got the same amount of money. And the taskmaster was like, guys, you agreed to this. Like, this is the money that you agreed to be paid for the amount of work that you did. It doesn't matter what the other person got paid. You know, they agreed to their price and you agreed to yours, and there shouldn't be any comparison because it's like they're not even related. Yeah, so it's just a principle to keep in mind, that comparing and judging is not our job at all. And, you know, what I have has nothing to do with what Kelcey has. And there's no comparison between us because what she needs and like what God has given her is completely different than what I need and what God has given me. Yeah. And as well, like, our struggles are totally different, even though, like, okay, we're quite similar as people, and, you know, we maybe relate in a lot of our struggles, but we're still totally different people. And also the way that God deals with our struggles are totally different, or is totally different. Yeah, so we can't, you know, we have no right and no place to judge other people. We're not the same.
Yeah, and even like with that, we need to honor each other, even in the simple fact that we are different and that God has placed different things in each of us. You know, he's got different things he's going to call each of us to do. He's going to have different positions that each person is going to be in, and at the same time, like, that's so necessary. You know, because if we were all exactly the same, we'd be very, very limited in the things that we could do. You know, our entire base functions because everyone is so different. You know, yeah, we've got heaps and heaps of artists, but then at the same time, you've got me, Gabby, and Carrie, who are probably as practical as they come, but at the same time help things to move forward. You know, we need a combination of people. It's like this, you know, always in the kingdom. Yeah, and that means we also need to honor those roles and actually respect the roles that God has asked each one of us to fill in the season that we're in. That means if someone's, you know, in a position or in a role of being a pastor, we need to honor them as that. You know, we need to honor, everyone in the roles that they're in. And to be honest, I'm going to go to a topic maybe that's a tiny, tiny bit controversial, but I think it's important that we go there. We need to honor even our roles as men and women in the kingdom, because we have very different roles as men and as women. And we're not going to go like too deep into this, because this is something that my husband and I together are going to talk with you guys about later on in the school. And I do think it's really important that he's also part of that conversation, because he's also got a perspective on it that's really helpful. to hear. So we'll discuss that later on. But just to kind of touch on that a bit, God is really clear, you know, in the Bible that he gives men and women different roles. And this doesn't mean like that it's, bear with me. I got a sister, and her biggest pet peeve is different things like in Romans, where he talks about like women can't preach and women need to do this in the church and all these things. And something so important, you know, when we get into those is to understand the context, you know, and the people group and all of that that Paul was writing to specifically, because he was writing to specific churches and to specific people groups. And because they're specific groups of people, because they're specific churches, they had specific individual problems as well. So these things, you know, he was talking very specifically for those groups. But at the same time, as men and women in the kingdom, we do still have different roles. I am not going to be able to minister the father heart of God to somebody. Why? Because I will never be a father. That just is what it is, you know. I don't think we can make that much simpler. But the Bible also is really clear about it talking about, for example, man being the head of his household. You know, I can't be the head of my household. I can try. And to be honest, I try all the time. But a little sweet secret for you is God is not with me when I'm trying. And the really funny thing is, like, I struggled so much with that, that like part of the Bible where it's talking about, yeah, like the man needs to be the one to manage the household and his household is going well and all that. It's kind of on him, that spiritual weight of the family. And like big decisions and things like that, I understand that, well, at the end of the day, he's making the executive decision for us, but he always comes back and he asks for my opinion. He asks for my perspective, you know, because he actually cares. And that is part of his role, is to actually love and care for me, you know. But at the end of the day, the one that's making the executive decision, that is his responsibility. It's not mine. And I need to honor that, you know. And for me, I'm very much so the more practical one out of the two of us. So for me, it would be so easy for me to go ahead, look at everything in a big picture, you know, and be like, all right, so this is the most practical, effective, and efficient way to do this and this and this, if this is what we're going for. And Joel doesn't even bother to look at the map of the big picture. He just kind of wings it in the moment and does whatever he thinks is great for that exact moment. And that is a great stress to my life. But at the same time, every time I make these really intricate, detailed, perfect plans, I find every way it can go wrong. I make sure it will not go wrong. And if it does go wrong, I've got another plan to get it back on track. Somehow, something happens that it goes wrong, you know? Joel walks through his life winging it in the moment, and it's seamless. Nothing goes wrong. Like, you would not believe, you know, especially the moments when he's responsible for me, nothing goes wrong. When realistically, if you look at it from, you know, a bigger picture, everything should have gone wrong. But the reality is that that's his role, and God is with him in it, you know, and God understands that he's not perfect and that he's going to make mistakes, and God will cover him in a different way in that role than God will cover me, because I'm trying to take a role that I wasn't anointed for. You know, that is his role. And so in relationships, it's so important that we recognize our roles, and especially as men and women in the kingdom. And someone gave me kind of a picture of what that looks like, you know, between husband and wife, like what that role would actually look like. And it was just a guy, you know, standing around, like with his arm around the girl, you know, and he was basically saying that this is to represent that you're covering and protecting, you know, but the woman is underneath because she's basically a pillar in a sense, so that if the guy needs rest, if he needs to relax, if he needs, you know, to stumble, essentially, there's someone there to keep pushing him back up, if that makes sense. And what we hear so many times is that we feel like the women get like a super weak, whatever role, you know, of being a housekeeper. And that's not the case at all. If you're going to be a pillar to support another person, you're going to be strong, you know, you're going to be stable. You're going to be, someone they can rely on, and you're going to be an encourager. And none of these things mean that we're weak, you know. We 100% know that God loves and values men and women the same, but we do have different roles in the kingdom, and we need to honor those different roles, because we can't be exactly the same. And that's okay. You know, God created men, and afterward, he also decided to create a woman. You know, if he wanted us to all be men, he would not have created a woman. So yeah, I think that's as far into that as I want to get to. But if you ever want to find also just a little bit more about the different roles and stuff, there's tons of verses in the Bible that talk about it, but especially for the women, Proverbs 31 is a really good one. I used to hate this verse with everything in me because I thought it made women just look like basic housewives. And to be honest, when you actually dig into these verses, there's nothing that's basic about it, you know? It's literally showing a woman that honors, a woman that respects, a woman that is taking care of others and embracing other people. And yeah, that's something that, to be honest, God has talked to me so much through this verse about what our role actually is in the kingdom. So yeah, just to kind of add that in there. And as a base, it's really funny for us with this one in particular, because we have a lot of very, very strong women on our team. A lot of women that like to make the executive decisions and can dominate very easily. And the thing is, when we do this, we're also trampling over the guys and not actually giving them space to step into their role, you know? Because if we're already taking their role, then what role are we leaving them to carry? We're not leaving them anything except ours. So it's not going to work very well. So I think in a lot of ways, you know, especially as a team in this season, God has been asking us to take a step down so that we can actually give them space to step up and to really step into who they were called to be, and allow them to really lead us and guide us. And yeah, I know God uses a lot of women on our team, but he's also using the men as well. Yeah, and to be honest, like as men and women in teams, we're going to make mistakes always. It is what it is, you know, but we need to have that extra grace to cover each other and to help, to help champion each other as well. And yeah, what I really, really like about this as well, about having the different roles, is that the combination of roles blesses so much, you know, when we actually have men and women walking in the roles of what God has called them to be and to do. It's such a blessing, not only for a few people, but literally for the whole team in itself, to people outside of the team. It's a blessing for everybody when we're able to walk in those roles that God has called us for and that God has anointed us for. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, the end of my tangent. Do we have any questions thus far before we carry on? Seems clear. Do we have any comments, anything anybody wants to add or chime in? No? Cool. If you have any at any point, please feel free to chime in. I enjoy when people interact and respond, so I'm not going to be upset about it.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm not upset
No,
about
I'm
it.
fine with that too. Yeah, so kind of like switching gears a little bit, but still along the same lines. So when you recognize the strength in somebody else, which is amazing, yay, we should be doing that. It doesn't become your excuse to like be lazy or to just like always give them that responsibility. Yeah, so like just because I'm maybe an organized person, that's not everyone else's excuse to not be organized, you know? Or maybe like it's not super easy for me to like have fun. I'm not a like crazy fun person, okay? But it doesn't mean that that's like an excuse for me to not try, because like, oh, someone else will have will run outreach or something. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, well, they'll plan the fun activities, you know, they'll make sure that we do something fun, that we go out to like have something to eat, and like, you know, I can plan the other parts, and like, that's not my problem. No. That's me making an excuse for like, they're better at it, so they should do it all the time, and I don't have to grow in that. That's not how that works. You should instead like see the strength in someone else, and then seek to like grow in those things, even by like watching them as an example. Yeah, and also to encourage them in the strengths that you see in them. Because even, you know, if you see a strength in somebody, that doesn't mean that they see it, or maybe they see it as a weakness. Yeah, a few weeks ago, I was talking, I don't know if you guys have met Courtney yet. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. She's one of the people on our team. And last summer I was leading an outreach, and I was really stressed. And like one day in discipleship, I was like, I don't know how to like be responsible and have fun at the same time. I feel like I can only do one or the other. And either all of the students are going to hate me and think that I'm really mean, or like, or that I like don't get anything done. And I'm just like, you know, this like wild, you know, person that like has no structure. And my discipler was like, well, look at Courtney. She does both of them really well. And I like, literally, I think about this constantly. I'm like, what would Courtney do? Not in a like, you know, like idolizing way, but like, you know, recognizing that that is a strength that she has. And that's something that like I want to get better at. And then a few weeks ago, I told Courtney this because we were like talking about something else. And she was like, wait, really? Like, I never thought of that. Like, you know, I never thought that that was something that like you would look up to or like, you know, see as a strength in me. You know, and it's something that she was encouraged by, because I actually said, I recognize this as a strength that you have. And I want, you know, and I'm not like copying you, but I see this and I want to honor it, and I want it to grow in me as well, because it's a necessary strength, you know? Yeah, I hope that makes sense. But basically, don't be lazy. Don't put your weaknesses off on someone else as something that they can do and you don't have to get better at. Yeah, but also take opportunities to encourage people in the things that you see in them. Because we all need encouragement. We all need to be reminded that we have strengths and that other people see the strengths. Yeah.
Yeah. And to kind of go alongside that as well, like, even though, I don't know, other people are able to see our strengths and like encourage us and all of that, like, we don't live off of just those encouragements, you know? We don't assume that we're doing terrible unless we get those encouragements. Sometimes people are not going to recognize anything that you do.
Yeah.
You know, and how are we going to move if no one's even recognizing it? Are you still going to show up every day? And are you still going to actually put in the same amount of work and the same amount of effort, even if it isn't being praised? But yeah, our worth in our team isn't based on the things that we do. You know, we're valuable regardless of how much we're able to accomplish. But the idea is that we can serve and that we can invest in other people. So obviously just accomplishing things and, you know, working to earn love and value is not the goal, but serving is the goal, and investing into other people and what other people are doing as well in ministry. I know with our team, we have so many different ministries happening at the same time. And I can't tell you how many times I end up joining some random ministry, doing something that I'm not qualified to do, just for the sake of helping to serve them and bless them, because they need somebody to be available, you know, to do something in the moment. Those visions, you know, that's what being in a team is about. That means we can't spend every single moment of our life focusing on this one thing that God has asked me to do. We need to serve and bless and invest in others as well, because we're pushing so much more than only our vision. We're pushing the vision of everyone at the base. Yeah, and kind of go along with that, no one person's vision on the team is more valuable than another as well. If God has put something in your heart to do, then that's what we should do, you know? But it doesn't mean that, you know, Carissa and Courtney's vision of Chasm is better than Gabby's vision of dance track, and I don't know, Carrie's vision of admin. You know, but with all these things, like, they're all equally valuable and they're all equally necessary in the kingdom. And all of these things are actually on God's heart. Even Carrie's admin is in God's heart, you know, because it's pushing the base as a whole. So literally every detail of the things that God has asked us to do, we're here to push and to work for and toward together. Yeah, and I've got a verse in 1 Corinthians. It's from chapter 12, verse 12 to 26. Ooh. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12 through 26. And I'm just going to read it out because it's kind of long. But it says, the human body has many parts, and the parts make up one whole body. So it is with the body of Christ. Some of us are Jews, some of us are Gentiles, some are slaves, and some are free. But we have all been baptized into one body by one Spirit, and we all share the same Spirit. As the body has many different parts, the body has many different parts, not just one part. If the foot says, I am not part of the body because I am not a hand, that does not make it any less part of the body. And if the ear says, I am not part of the body because I'm not an eye, would that make it any less part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, how would you hear? Or if your whole body were an ear, how would you smell anything? But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where he wants it. How strange a body would be if it had only one part. Can you imagine that? Just like one giant eyeball? Because that's all that I see right now. The eye can never say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. In fact, some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important are actually the most necessary, and the parts we regard as less honorable are those we clothe with the greatest care. So we carefully protect those parts that should not be seen, while the more honorable parts do not require this special care. So God has put the body together such that an extra honor and care are given to those parts that have less dignity. This makes for harmony among the members so that all the members care for each other. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it, and if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. Yeah, I really like this verse because I feel like that is pretty much as clear as anyone can paint that out to be. We're all valuable, and the vision that God has given all of us is valuable. And even though maybe some people seem less exciting and some visions seem less exciting, none of them are any more or less valuable than each other. But they're actually all specifically placed there for serving essentially the rest of the body, because we're all needed. We're all necessary. That tiny little gift that God has given you that you think little of is actually necessary for the team, which is why God brought you here. So yeah, I think that's pretty explanatory.
Yeah. Oh, I love this one. Okay. Yes. So something that it becomes quite obvious in YWAM because we are dealing with many cultures kind of colliding in the same place.
I have a good example about that.
Okay, I'm ready. Yeah, but it's like sometimes when we're never taken out of our own culture or our own like environment, we don't see this as, it's not as obvious. But you go to a place, even like, in the States, you move to a different city, like you're going to see very quickly that the things that you understand about the world are different than what other people understand about the world. And it's very, very important to realize that you are not always right. That whoever you are, whatever culture, background you come from, whatever your understanding, even about like theology and like stuff with God and religion and stuff, it's not always right. We are all humans, and therefore we are all flawed. We all, like, even with truth, we don't see the fullness of truth. We see part of it. And this again ties back to like judgment and criticism, that we come from our own perspective, and that limits our understanding and what we can see. Yeah, so basically, like, all of us have a limited understanding of the world. And yeah, your way of doing things or thinking about things is not, first of all, it's not always right, and it might not be the only right as well. That there are, there's, from our house to get to the King's Cross house, there's 5 different ways, at least, to get there. And it doesn't mean that one is correct and the rest are wrong. It means that one is maybe my preference, and one is Kelcey's preference, and we'll maybe, like, if we're going together every day, we'll switch up which way we go based on which, how you want to go. But yeah, that's like a super basic example, but like we need to be aware of this in like all of the ways that we think, how like we judge each other as well, or how we're like, no, you're right, you're wrong, you're kind of like on the right path, but you're not there yet. But if that's all coming from just how we see things, then we're always gonna be limited and probably wrong. This is also really important with like the people we choose to surround ourselves with. Because if you always choose to be friends with people that think the same way that you think, you'll never be challenged in how you see things. You'll never be challenged to change or to question why you believe the things that you believe. If you only ever surround yourself like with the same friends that you always had in church, then you'll never be challenged to think about, God and the things that you grew up with in your church in a different way. And of course there's there's a line there. And we don't need to go too deep into that, but like, it is really healthy to be challenged and to be questioned and, to maybe have some things shaken in your life, in your thought processes and stuff, so that you actually know what you believe. Because maybe you've grown up in the church your whole life and you no one ever questioned what you believed because they all believed the same thing. But what if that belief is wrong? Then you'll never know if you never, have someone else ask you. If you never open yourself to change, you'll never change, and you'll limit what you can receive from other people and what other people can receive from you as well if you're, so set on like your being right. Do you want to share your example?
Yeah. Okay, so my example, basically, okay, well, here's the problem. Anytime we talk about this in person with anyone, it usually starts a fight, but I don't think it will do that because we don't have any South Americans here, so we're fine.
Oh, okay. I was like, what are you going to talk about?
So I discovered after I got married, it was too late, that in South America, they teach their people that there are 5 continents. And I was like, what? What do you mean there's 5 continents? There's 7. But my husband's worse too. There's 5.
There's 5.
If we ever have a child, I don't know what we're going to tell them. Compromise would be telling them there's 6, but I don't know which one we cut. So...
or add, depending on which perspective you're coming from.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But still, that was something that I was just like, no, you're wrong. That's not even a question. This is geographically how it is, And it's the way that they, add things together that's completely different. But either way, in their mind, there's 5, and that's just how it is. And this is something that I regularly fight with South Americans about whenever it comes up. So it's an interesting thing, but that's just an example of what your culture teaches you, because geographically it's all exactly the same, but the way they're counting it is different, and they have their reasons why it's right, and I have my reasons why my way is right. And who knows, like, I don't think God was really thinking how many continents are there when he created the world, but we get really stuck in these little things, and it's these tiny little things that can actually cause massive problems within teams, and stupid fights that are not necessary. But that's just an example of how our culture is like teaching us things are right or wrong in different senses.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As well, kind of with that, like for me, I'm a very logical person. If I believe something, I have reasons for why I believe it. And I have kind of like not an argument, but kind of an argument, for like these are the 4 reasons why I believe this, or why I think this is right, why I think this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. And it's very, very difficult for me to listen to someone like maybe say something different than what I think, and they don't have any like logic to back it up, in my flesh, I'm kind of like, okay, like you're a joke. But that, that's like my natural response. But first of all, that's not loving at all. But just because I have like logic, or like my understanding of logic, that also does not mean that I'm right. And at the same time, you can be right all you want, but if you can't love the person or like, if you can't be right in love, then being right doesn't do you anything, you know, because being right is not the goal. The goal is to love. The goal is to translate the love of Jesus to everyone around you. So if being right is going to stop you from loving somebody, then you've already lost. It doesn't matter how logical you are. You've lost the battle. So this is really important. This is something I have to like keep in mind all the time. I have to check myself before I respond to things, or before I like bring an argument to the table. I have to like kind of take a step back and look at myself and say, am I doing this because I want to prove that I'm right? And I definitely do that. I'm like, you know, just going to be pretty open about that. I definitely, you know, I like being right, and I like proving why I am right, because I'm like, I put all this thought into it. Do you want to see my logic? But yeah, it doesn't really do anyone, doesn't benefit anybody. It definitely doesn't benefit the kingdom of God if, you know, I can prove that I'm right, but I've hated the person in the process, or I've pushed them further away from God, just to prove a point. So yes, keep that in mind, and you might need to sit. That one took me a while to understand. Julian, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I have a question. I think love is the goal, but love is always in the truth. So when you're right, I think I understand what you say, what you said, and I don't. I agree with that. But sometimes to say something right when someone says something wrong is love too, because love is in the truth. You know what I mean? And so what about the consequences? Because if you don't say the right thing when the right things when someone said something wrong, you're not in love, but because love is in the truth. You understand what I'm saying? Or?
Yeah.
What about these consequences? Because if the person say something wrong, it's gonna affect his life and the life of the others around this person. So how can we be wise with that, and to be with love, truth, and don't let the person go in a bad way?
Yeah, like it's a really good question. It all has to do with the heart and the motivation behind why are you, you know, saying what you're saying. And it also depends on like your relationship, your position with the person, and their, like, are they ready to receive the fact, you know, like your correction, or, you know, whatever it is. Because there's definitely moments where, you know, maybe you see that someone, or it can even just be like somebody on the street, you know, if it would be, this is kind of a ridiculous example, but I hope it helps. If you walk by like two people having a conversation on the street, and somebody says, well, you know that the earth is flat, and the other person goes, yes, of course it is it really your place to turn around and say, well, actually, it was proven in this year by this person and blah, 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 that the earth is round. And aren't you such an idiot because you don't know that, and you should know that, you know? Of course, none of us are going to do that. But your motivation in that moment and is to prove why you're right. And you also have no relationship with this person. You have no like context for what they're talking about. As far as you know, they could be rehearsing a scene for their drama class, you know, and then you've just completely like made a fool of yourself. But yeah, it's really important to of course like ask God for wisdom, and you know, even if you feel like, sometimes it happens to me that maybe I'll be like discipling somebody or something, and they say something that's, or they're like totally off in the wrong direction. even though like it's my position in that moment to correct them, I still have to check my heart and say, and ask God to show me where my heart is and to realign my heart with his before I open my mouth. Yeah. Does that make sense, Julian? Does that help? Awesome. Yeah. Oh, I forgot I have more notes to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something else, and this is a fun one, is that when we are struggling, maybe like there's somebody in your house that you struggle with some of their habits, or I don't know, you struggle with somebody. Usually, sometimes 50-50. It's because we also, like, I struggle with the same thing in myself, and maybe I just don't see it yet. And it could also be that I'm jealous of somebody, there are certain behaviors that annoy me a lot. And it probably is because I do those same things. And maybe I don't see them. Or they just annoy me and I see it in myself and it annoys me because it annoys me in myself. That happens as well. Yeah, but it can also be things that we're jealous of in somebody else, I didn't think of an example. I don't know, maybe I really want to be a good hair braider. I'm terrible with hair. I can put my hair in a ponytail and that's it. I really want to be a good at braiding hair.
It's the only good thing you found in me.
I thought of a stupid example. She does not think the best. And I am not, and I recognize that I am not, but I know that Kelcey is. And instead of like letting her, braid my hair sometimes, I'm just like, I cannot believe that Kelcey like goes around braiding people's hair all the time, and she walks out like with a braid in her own hair, like she's rubbing it in my face because she just wants to prove that she's better at it than I am. Like, probably not. I think it's a me problem and not a her problem.
It's also a Gabby problem that I only have one redeeming quality, but
yeah. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. That the next time you get annoyed with somebody, maybe check your own heart before just like pointing the finger at them, because might be something going on in you, probably something going on in you. Yeah. So just want to put that out there, and I think I'm gonna skip that because we already talked about it.
Cool. We're going to go into a few little practical things when it comes to working in teams. And just to start us off, a team is never one person. I know we have this saying that there's no I in team, and that is very, very correct. Whenever you're starting something, like if you're wanting to start a new ministry or something like that, I would always suggest that you have at least 3 people, because then you have at least always the possibility of there being a majority when you're trying to make decisions and things like this. But also it's wise to keep other people involved in the things that you're doing in ministries and stuff, because then that's also giving you somebody to be accountable to. Those people are able to call you out and be like, hey, maybe this isn't actually going well, or hey, maybe this is not actually from God, maybe this is something that's just coming from you. But they're able to call you out and to keep you accountable, and also to give you different perspectives as well, because we always need different perspectives. It's so healthy for us to have other people's perspectives in things. And yeah, sometimes other people's perspectives are not great and not helpful, but to be honest, we should always be willing to hear another perspective. We should never be so stuck in like my process, or what is the word? My English is dying, but I don't have another language.
So your perspective.
Yeah, that's the word.
That's a good word.
Yes, my perspective cannot be the only one.
Yeah.
It can't be. We're not God. We don't have the highest perspective. it is what it is. You know, our experiences have shaped the perspectives that we've had, the things that we've learned, what we've lived, all of it. Our cultures, they shape our perspectives, but our perspectives can't be the only one. So it's so healthy to have a team of people with you who are able to show you a different side of things. Another thing to consider is the longer that you've been in a team, the more of a platform you're going to become. So basically what I'm trying to say with that is, if you picture like a human pyramid, you know, there's a few people on the bottom that are making the foundation, and then some other people get on top, and then some other people get on top of that, and eventually you have your human pyramid. That's what it's like when you're in leadership with a team. So essentially what you're doing, if you're starting a ministry, if you're in leadership of a team, whatever, you're paving the way so that others can go further than you. You're paving the way so that they can reach more. And this is kind of like what Moses and Aaron did for Joshua. So Moses and Aaron went first and they paved the way so that Joshua could go and he could be the one that conquered. And we should always be having this mentality when we're working in teams, because some of the things that I'm doing now, I know the people that I'm discipling are going to be able to take that further one day, you know, and I'm not going to look at them when they have taken it further and be like, oh, but why wasn't that me that gets the glory of that? But I had to do all the hard work of starting it and pioneering it and all of that. Like, I'm going to celebrate with them because I know that what I'm doing now is paving the way so that they can go further than me, you know? Through our discipleship times, I'm helping them to not make the same mistakes that I've already made so that they can save themselves that time and go further. And that should be what we're willing to do for other people who we're functioning in teams with and who we're leading, who we're discipling. When you're in positions of leadership with teams in the future, understand that you're serving and you're getting down on your hands and knees so that they can climb up on top of you and reach further. We should always have this mentality in teams. And I think as well, when you're in a team, there's always going to be different roles that you have in different seasons, you know? Sometimes it'll be your season to be in leadership. Sometimes it'll be a season where you're pioneering and you're starting something out of nothing. Sometimes it's going to be a season where you're a follower, you know, and we need to honor those seasons. We need to respect those seasons. It's so easy for us to have, like, say, for example, God said that you're going to be a leader one day, you know, and so you walk in and you're like, well, God said I'm a leader, so I'm here, you know, and then you're ready to lead. It doesn't really work like that, you know. There's seasons for everything, and God will lift you up to put you in leadership when it's his timing and when it's the season for that. And there are going to be seasons as well where you're in leadership and then you're put back into being in a position of following, and then you're back in a position of leadership. Like it comes and it goes, you know. But we should always honor that season and recognize that God has something that he wants to do in us and through us in that season. We should never get stuck in that sense. We need to be flexible, and we need to be willing to let God put us where he wants us, and we need to be willing to follow. And kind of to go along with that, there's something we always say here, like, you need to be flexible and stable. And I feel like they might have talked to you guys about that in the YWAM values. I think that's normally where they first talk about it. This is a really, really important one. I think especially it was important for me because I always mistook flexibility for instability. You know, I was like, okay, well, if we're supposed to stay flexible, then obviously we're not very stable, because if plans were stable, they wouldn't be changing all the time, you know. But actually stability is not something that comes through plans. So that's a different issue that I had. Yeah, but plans change all the time. You know, things are going to change. Circumstances change. We work with people, and people are constantly changing, growing, developing. And you know what? We have mood swings. We have emotions. We have situations that come up. Like, it's life, you know? But that doesn't mean that we need to move in a way that is unstable. And I always thought that, like, stability was something that comes in your personality trait, you know? So I was like, oh yeah, like, I'm a stable person, but that also I thought meant like I have all my plans and I'm organized and like all of that. And that isn't what stability is. So being flexible and stable essentially means that you are stable in your relationship, first of all, with God, you know, that you have trust in him, that you have trust in your leaders and your authorities and the people that are guiding you. And that flexibility is going to come knowing that the plans can change and things can change. But at the same time, God is still who he said he will be. The leaders that you have in your life are still looking out for you, and you can trust and not have an emotional crisis every time something changes. And because I always thought that stability was something that was in, you know, personality and stuff, I always thought it was so interesting, like how Chris, like our base leader, he changes plans 24/7. We put something in the schedule, and honestly, give it 24 hours, it could change. You know, I don't ever get like super set on that plan unless we're like 10 minutes from it happening. And I'm like, okay, this is still what we're going with. Great. And so for me, this screams like that he would bring the feeling of instability with him wherever he goes because plans are not so stable. So I assume all the time that like, oh yeah, he must be, you know, unstable, whatever. But at the same time, if anything is going wrong, he walks into the room and all of a sudden you feel a bit safer, you know, and everything feels more solid and the chaos seems to be a bit less, you know. And it's not because he's done anything, but because he's actually stable in a spiritual sense. I don't think stability is a personality thing. I think stability is a spiritual thing. And we can bring stability with us, you know, wherever we go. We can bring peace to the chaos. You know, we have that authority. And yeah, so we need to be flexible and we need to be stable. And that's something that goes beyond our personality. Plans can come and go. They can change. Our feelings can come and go. Unstable, and flexibility is not instability. Yes.
Yeah. So continuing with the like practical points. Yeah, this one I'm really just going to speak from experience. We're going to talk a little bit about like how to work with like in a team and with a team mindset. If you're the only person like maybe in your team, in your ministry, or with the vision that you have. So for me, like I've been the only staff in the dance track, the dance ministry, since 2018. I think, yeah, the beginning of 2018. So it's been a while. And I learned a lot through it. I've had students, I've had interns, and they have been, you know, huge blessings. And we've been able to like do a lot. And hopefully that will change soon. But yeah, like I had to learn a lot about like how to choose to be reliant on other people and how to choose teamwork and interdependence. Yeah, because it would have been very easy in all of this time to just be independent and be like, this is my ministry, this is what I'm doing, that like I just get to decide whatever I want, and everyone else just has to, like all of my students, whatever, have to do it because I'm the one in charge. And that's, you know, that's a way that I could have approached it, and definitely did in some moments. But the reality is like, I believe that the ministry grew so much and like we reached so much further because I chose to work with other people, because I chose to, you know, bring in people from other ministries and do collaborations with them. And yeah, and even when I had students and interns and whatever, to ask them for like their opinion and their vision and like what do you want to see happen during this DTS? What do you want to do during your internship? Where do you want to grow? You know, because it's not about me. It's not like the Gabby show because I'm the only one there. You know, but it very easily can turn into that. When we're, you know, maybe alone for a season, like it can turn into being about us. But it's not meant to, you know, it's, yeah, it's meant to be so much beyond us. And honestly, if you're trusted with something that is in God's heart, you know, you have a lot of responsibility. There were definitely many times when I felt like, not the pressure, but like you feel that responsibility of like, well, I have to be the one that pushes for this because no one else is going to, you know. And there's definitely that reality of like, okay, if I want to reach the dancers in London, then I got to go to them. I have to be the one that goes to classes. I have to be the one that sets up meetings with choreographers. Like, you know, I have to go to these events, to these shows. Like, I have to invest my time and my money and my, like, you know, my energy to build those relationships because there's nobody else to do it right now. but I also believe that like, because I chose to be faithful with that God is going to bless it, and God's, gonna bring fruit in it, and we're already seeing him do that. So it's, there's kind of the both sides of it of, you can't be independent, because when we choose to be independent and, work alone, like in our heart and in our mindset, that's when, God won't really be behind us, because he's not okay with that. He doesn't support you as you like walk in independence and, believing that you can do everything on your own. It really is a matter of the heart. It's not a matter of, the position that you're in. If you want to be independent, you will be independent. If you want to work in a team, you will find ways to work in a team. You'll make it a priority, and you will be blessed for that. Other people will make it a priority to work with you as well. Because they'll see that your heart for the ministry is not to just like do everything by yourself. That your heart is more for, to bring other people in. Does this make sense? Cool. So we're also going to talk a little bit about what this like concept of teamwork and relationships and what it looks like in a secular environment, because life is not YWAM. That's, won't even all work in ministry or in a Christian environment our entire lives. So it's important to acknowledge that these same principles also apply in secular environments. So, I want to like touch back to the beginning when we talked about, I think it was John 13, that we will be known by how we love. And that's true whether you're loving a Christian person or a non-Christian person. You will be known by how you love, and how you love well. So, in YWAM, we don't really have like titles. We might have like, people in leadership for a season or like, people who are base leaders. But that like is really only so that when, like who makes the final decision or like, stuff like that. Sorry. My voice gets very dry when I talk. But like in a business, for example, everyone has different titles. You have different roles, and that's totally normal because it's necessary for the operation of the business. But that doesn't mean that like having a title or like earning more money than somebody else, that doesn't give you an excuse to like treat them differently. We are still always called to serve and to love people and to lift them up and honor them and, call out their strengths, encourage them. All of these things are still our job as Christians. They're still our responsibility. And so that doesn't change. If we're a stay-at-home parent or a pastor or a CEO or a house cleaner or whatever, we're called to the same principles of how Jesus lived his life. So it's definitely like important to pay attention to those things and look at how we're loving people, and how we're encouraging them and how are we representing Christ in that team, regardless of what that team looks like, how big it is, how small it is, whether everybody else on it is a Christian or not. We still represent the same God, and we still want to represent him the same way. Another one that's fun, and it's fun for me, is that when we're in a team, or really anytime, is that we must like look to cover each other. So that kind of means I noticed that we use this phrase a lot in our team, in our base. But if you have never heard that, then you would have no idea what it means, maybe. So basically, to like cover somebody is when they make a mistake or maybe it wasn't true in the moment or whatever, that you, instead of like throwing them under the bus and saying like, oh yeah, well they really messed up, didn't they? Like, you know, oh well, like that person, yeah, they really suck at that, or you know, whatever, is actually to like go out of your way to cover them with grace. You know, so maybe like, I don't know, we're planning an outreach and I forgot to plan the meals. I forgot to plan who would be on lunch. Everyone else that's like on the outreach staff with me is going to be like, oh, everyone, Gabby forgot to plan who is cooking lunch. Did everyone hear that? Yeah, do you all know that happened? No, they're going to figure it out, you know, and if it's a consistent problem, they're going to come to me and say, hey, you keep forgetting to do this, but this is your responsibility. So please do this. If you need help, we're here to help you. But like, you know, this is your job. You should be doing it. But that's more of like, that's a private conversation. That's something that they're going to address separately. But if it's like a one-off thing, you know, I was super busy and it just slipped my mind, you know, they're going to, because they love me and don't want me to like, you know, be thrown under the bus. They're gonna be like, oh, can like, I'm available. Are you available to cook lunch? Cool. Then we'll just do it. Yeah. So I hope that is clear. But basically, yeah, don't throw people under the bus because it's not fun when it happens to you, and it's not loving when you do it to somebody else, basically. Yeah, and we all make mistakes, so we're all gonna need grace at some point, and it's nicer that you do it to others. Yeah, as well, experience doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you like more important or more valuable. It's basically like having more experience in something is an opportunity for you to give space to other people and to teach them how to do the things that you've already done and to help them go further, like Kelcey was saying. And it also is an opportunity for you to cover them when they make mistakes in the things that they're learning how to do. Yeah, so it's not a reason for us to be proud or to, you know, think more highly of ourselves. It's an excuse for us to help other people. So it's the best kind of excuse. Yeah.
Yeah, the last point that I have here in the practical side of things is to make sure that you get to know yourself. Because to be honest, this is something that's really helpful in teams, is to actually know, first of all, you know, it's good to know where your strengths are, but it's also, I think, arguably even more important that you know where you're lacking and what your weaknesses are. Because to be honest, the things that we don't know about ourselves can and are going to hurt other people. And it's actually a good thing for us to take a look at our shortcomings, and not so we can go and have like a pity party and be like, oh my gosh, I'm horrible and everything I do is wrong and I'm failing and all these things, but actually to know where we have room to grow, you know, because I can recognize very easily that, I don't know, I'm a bulldozer, for example. It's really easy for me to decide how things are going to go, and I'll just run everybody over in order to get to the end goal. And that's how it's going to go, you know? And for me to be able to recognize that in myself gives me the upper hand to be like, okay, wait, maybe I should actually not be the first one to speak, or maybe I should speak with a little bit more grace so that people know there is an alternative option, you know? Or even, you know, maybe I should shut up sometimes and give other people space to lead. So just little things like that. I know there's tons and tons of super helpful like tools in order to get to know yourself better. And that's like different personality types and things like that. Like the Enneagram is super, super helpful. Myers-Briggs, the 4 temperaments, all that sort of thing. I'm going to teach you guys about personalities in a few weeks, but not all of those things, though. It's not Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and temperaments is too much.
All in one day.
No. But these are really helpful tools, you know, and they're not tools that we can access just so that we can become victims, you know, to our personalities and the way that we are. But they're super helpful tools for us to recognize where both our strengths and our weaknesses are, so that we kind of can stop ourselves from, you know, our own crap. And it also helps you to understand other people better as well, you know, because if we understand all the other different personality types and ways that people move and perceive things and understand things, then that also helps us to love them better, you know, and it helps us to invest in people better. I've been reading so many different books on the Enneagram recently just because I really like it. And it's helped me, for example, to understand so many other people in my house that much better. Because there's a few people in my house that, you know what their type is and have read up on this and all that. And it's so helpful for us to recognize then, okay, how we should actually interact with each other in a way that's going to bless them, but also how we can challenge them to grow more, you know? So yeah, if you do any studies or, you know, research in these things, please don't become a victim of your personality. And please don't allow yourself to be put in a box, you know, because just because that's maybe the way that our personality type is, or maybe we fall under a certain category, doesn't mean that that's all that there is to us, you know, because God created us as such unique and complex people that it's impossible to box us into just a few personality types, you know. Those are general types. But there's going to be little bits and pieces for many things that make sense for you and resonate with you. And that's also okay, you know. But definitely take time to actually get to know yourself and be willing to acknowledge where your shortcomings are. Again, not so you can have a pity party about it or like feel like you failed, but to recognize where you have room to grow. Yeah, because I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And kind of tying in with that, we need to be willing to have grace with others as well, with their shortcomings. You know, whether or not they're aware of their shortcomings, we need to have grace with them. Yes, if people are falling short, you know, in things repeatedly, there are ways to deal with that, you know. At least for me personally, if I need to confront somebody with something, first of all, I need to step back and think, okay, is this my place? Kind of like what Gabby was saying earlier. Or in YWAM situation, is it their discipler's place to confront this? Because if it's the discipler's place to confront this, then maybe I need to go and say to their discipler, hey, like, I noticed this, not sure if you think you should do something about it or not, but I'm going to leave this here for you. But there are some situations where I need to do it myself, you know? For example, if I'm having an issue with Gabby is my friend. I'm going to tell Gabby if I have a problem or if she's doing something that doesn't seem to be very good for her, you know? Before I go to her discipler, I'm typically going to go to her myself and say, you know what, hey, I noticed this, and for me, this isn't good. You know, I don't think this is good for you. I wanted to talk to you about this, you know, and try and help her out of it, or at least say that to her, you know. It's not my responsibility to fix her, and it's not my responsibility to make sure that she stops. My responsibility is to take the truth, to present the truth to her, and then I leave it. And it's her responsibility of whether or not she takes that truth and does anything with it. You know, she can take it and go back to God and her discipler and work it out, you know. I think we're going to cover a little bit more of, where is it? I put somewhere in here, hang on, I have more notes about, you know, working out teams, but we'll see. Yeah, it's okay, I'll go there now. Yeah. So yeah, in Matthew 18 from 15 to 17, it talks a little bit about this. And it's basically just, wait, is it Matthew? Yeah. Matthew 18, 15 to 17 talks about this, and basically, just how to solve things within the church. I'm going to try and find the verse just so I can read it out and make sure that it's right, because I just felt like it wasn't.
It's down here.
Oh, I did already. See, I already put the verses in the teaching in advance, but it's separated by the page, so I got really stressed. It says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. It's a bit strong, but basically what I like about that is it's pretty easy way to relate to our real life, now. So go to the person if you have a problem with them within your team, talk with them and try to work it out. If you're not able to work out the issue with them, or you've confronted something in them and they don't seem to want to hear it, go and talk to their discipler, and have that person come back with you and have a conversation with them about it. And if still the person is not willing to hear from you or take anything from it, then is the moment to go to a higher authority. In your cases, it could be your DTS leader, or it could be Chris and Joanna, the base leaders. But, at that point, you start to take it to a higher and higher perspective at that point. Because, like we said, it's not our responsibility to fix the person, but at the same time, we do need to be willing to help each other, and to work out conflicts that we have, and to confront things that are difficult to confront, because that is part of loving people. I know one time we went on an evangelism time, and there was a guy who was doing like photos and like creative writing pieces about the photo, and like whatever he was writing, it was really interesting. Like he was trying to basically send a message, in the same way that we do our art that is going to display a message and kind of point people back to God. He was doing his art with a purpose. But his purpose was really interesting and kind of humanistic. And he was doing some piece about love, and he was basically saying how like love is accepting everything, and love is like encouraging people to go to what makes them happy, and like all these things. And we were just doing evangelism, so I was like walking, we was in a market, and I was like, just walking through whatever, and he pulls me to the side and says, hey, like, I want to know what you think about this. And so I was like, I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is not great. And I was like, well, I'm going to put this out here. First of all, just to preface everything, I like that you're making art with a purpose. I like that you didn't just take a picture and, put it there. Like, I like that you're thinking about this, and really like, you want to do something more. But I said to him at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't really agree with your perspective in all of this. I don't know. I think it's lacking some, and he basically was like, no, like, I want to hear, just lay it all out there. And I was like, I don't think you really want to hear what I think about this, because it was not good. So I tried in so many like kind ways, to tell him that, yeah, it's not really truth, and he was like, no, like, just tell me what you think. And I was like, okay, you want to know what I think? I think it's a bit humanistic, to be honest. And he was so offended. And he was like, but why you think it's humanistic? And I was like, because like love is not always something that's so fluffy, and it's not about always feeling happy. Like there's going to be moments in life where love needs to be confrontational, And he was like, no, like love is not confrontational. And I was like, what? So if my mom was deciding that she's going to start doing drugs because drugs make her happy, you're saying that if I love my mom, I will let her do that. And he said, yes, because you need to allow people to be themselves and to be happy. And I was like,
sorry, Sadie's face is killing me.
I was like, no, it's not how this works.
Sadie's like, what?
Yeah. So anyway, I was just explaining to him how I personally see that love is confrontational, If my mom is doing drugs, I can clearly see that is not a good decision for her. And he's saying, but who are you to say if it's a good decision? And I was like, her daughter? Like, I don't know. But anyway, in the end, he was not thrilled with me for saying that to him. And he was saying as well that he just doesn't see how we can have this view, and he's Christian and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, I don't see how if you're Christian, you can think that this is humanistic, because Jesus was the most humanistic. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's like Jesus was the most confrontational. Jesus didn't let people get away with these things. Jesus was the most confrontational. And the thing is that love is confrontational. And we're coming into a really, really humanistic generation, that we don't want to confront anything, and we want to tolerate everything. And we can't tolerate everything. The Bible never tells us to tolerate sin.
Yeah.
The Bible has never told us to tolerate sin. He told us to embrace people and to love people. And we need to communicate the truth to them in a way that is loving and in a way that is embracing. But we need to still tell the truth, and we need to be clear, you know? And so in teams, when you notice something, you know, you need to step back and see, okay, is it my place to confront this, or is it somebody else's place? And if it's your place, go and say something to the person and confront them in love. Like Gabby said earlier, not out of your desire to be right, but confront them in love. And if they don't receive, go and talk to their discipler about it, you know? Or if you recognize that it's not your place to confront them, go straight to their discipler and say, hey, I noticed this and I wanted to talk with you about it, you know? And then you don't follow up with the discipler and say, so did you talk? How did it go? No, you take what you need to say, you drop it off with the discipler, and you leave them to do what is their responsibility to do. Do you have anything to add into how we handle conflict?
Yeah, I just want to mention for like
I see Kevin.
Yeah, I see Kevin. Practical with like, you know, when someone like, you know, you're in an environment where someone like doesn't have a discipler, which is like most life environments that are not YWAM.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to something like that, like even with like the coffee shop that we have, you know, Perry is the manager. So if I notice that like when I come in and open on like this day, like every time that I open, there's crumbs all over the floor because the person who closed the night before didn't hoover or vacuum for the Americans. You know, I'm not going to go chase that person down and say, what are you doing? Like, you didn't hoover properly, and what, you know, who do you think you are? No, I'm going to go to Perry and say, hey, I noticed that for the last few weeks, the floor is really dirty when I come in the morning. Of managing that word. I'm not in a position of managing. I am there as an employee, you know, for the sake of our example, I'm there as an employee, you know, and I don't have that position, but maybe, you know, one day I will, or in a different, you know, environment, I will. And in which case, you know, if somebody brought that to me, then it would be my job to go to the other person that, you know, the person came and talked to me about. And I would have to say, again, still in love, hey, can you please, you know, be more aware of like when you're closing that you're hoovering the floors. Maybe, you know, double check it because you might be missing spots. And yeah, you know, still thinking the best and confronting it in love, but you can't just leave it, you know, because in this example, that's how we get mice. And then that's how we get shut down because we didn't follow health and safety. And it's gross, you know? Yes, Kevin.
So what Kelcey said about, like, if I saw Julian doing something that I think he shouldn't do, and I talk, oh, it cut. Oh, there it is. Yeah, and I talk with Fede about it because I don't think it's my place to talk with Julian about it because I'm no one. I understand what you said, that I shouldn't like go behind Fede, like, oh, did you talk to him, stuff like that. But part of me says, well, I love this person and I care about this person, so I want to know. You know what I mean? Like, so that contradicts what you're saying and what I think I should do. So I don't know what to think. I understand it's not my place to make sure that happens, that changes happen. I completely understand, but I care about this person, so I want to make sure that at least Fede did his part because I think it's important, even though it's not my place. So it's just that it's like contradicting. I mean, most of the time, I think that if I see this change on Julian, I can tell. Oh, you see, Fede did it and it worked out great, or whatever. But if I don't see this change, did Fede listen to me? Like, did he even care? I probably would. What I do is go again to Fede and say, hey, this happened, and maybe Fede opens up to me, saying, well, I forgot about it, or yeah, he wasn't listening to me, or I don't know, whatever reason he had. Oh no, it's nothing specific. Don't worry. But yeah,
Kevin's like, I have list?
I have a list.
What are you doing, Julian?
I don't know.
So would that be wrong of me going to Fede? Like, if I don't see something changing, like with Julian, I don't know, an example right now because I'm not thinking bad about him.
That's okay. We get you.
But if Julian did something constantly, I talked to Fede and he kept doing it, would it be okay to go back to Fede and say, hey, he's still doing it? Or no?
Yeah. I think if you would go back to him and say, hey, like, I noticed this happening again. I just wanted to let you know, but not like saying, okay, but did you ever talk to him about it?
Yeah.
Because in that sense, like, it's not exactly your place to know, exactly how that's going, because that's the thing with discipleship is that it is personal, it is person to person. So you can, if you see him doing the same thing again, then you could go back and say, hey, I noticed that he's doing this again, or that this additional thing happened, I just wanted to let you know. And sometimes there's even times where I've gone and, for example, have gone to like someone's discipler, usually in a situation of my peers, and been like, hey, I noticed this. And as a friend, like I considered saying something, but I don't know if it's wise for me, or I don't know if they would receive. Should I or should I stay out of it,
Yeah.
And then as a discipler, they can, because to be honest, like if I want to say something or confront Gabby in something, maybe she'll receive it well from me. But if I want to go and I want to confront Carrie on something, maybe Carrie won't receive it well from me, because each person is in a different place with a different process. And maybe the thing that you're confronting them about is something they've been dealing with for a while or insecure about or don't want you to, you're not the person sometimes.
Yeah.
So in those situations, if, like, I think it's always best to, first of all, go to the discipler and let them know and let them, deal with it, or ask them if you want to say something yourself. Hey, I thought about this, but I want your advice. Should I or shouldn't I? And respect what they have asked you to do. Because as their discipler, they know best where the person is at. But to answer your question more specifically, like, yeah, I would go back and say like, hey, just so you know, like, this is happening again. But I wouldn't be like, did you say something about it? Did you do it? What did he say?
I mean, if for some reason Fede wants to share it with me, he could, right? There's nothing wrong with doing it. Like, depends to the degree of the subject.
It definitely depends on the situation.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, because at least for me, like, I don't want to go and tell everybody my disciples process, because I don't feel like that's covering them. Yeah. So I think the majority of the time, they're probably not going to tell you what exactly is going on with them. And that's really not because they are like, well, this isn't your business, whatever.
No, I know.
But it's just out of covering essentially like the person, because some people care more if other people know about their process and some don't. So,
and as well, I want to bring like a different perspective to it. Like kind of like with the same question is that sometimes, I notice in my life, like, Ellen will say something to me about something. She'll, bring conviction. And then I notice like the next, week, 10 days or so that I struggle more with it than when I did beforehand, So it doesn't mean that she didn't, and it doesn't mean that God's not doing it. Like it's probably like even more obvious that he is working because like, I feel like a terrible person. That's not why it's obvious. But like I'm aware of my sin and therefore my need for God. And it's maybe more obvious to other people. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that Ellen didn't say anything to me. It means like, that she did. And and we're still in the process of it. So just to consider that as well.
But I'd rather not assume anything and just do
it definitely doesn't hurt to go back and say like, hey, I noticed that this person is still, that this is still happening. And especially like, I don't know, even for me, sometimes it's helpful if I don't live with my disciple or like see them very often, there's things that I don't know about. And it's, it's helpful for me when other people come and say like, hey, I noticed this, or, this is going on, or this situation happened. you know, even if I like gives me a little bit of warning, so that when someone comes to me and is like, ah, then, you
I
know,
love
like,
confrontation.
yes,
I love
heard
to
that
confronted.
happened.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Did you cover everything here?
No, I didn't
Okay.
cover anything here.
Okay, cool. Go for
I
it.
skipped. Yeah, but I touch on this really quickly.
Mhm.
But that relationships also, and teamwork and all this, it requires vulnerability from
Mhm.
us as well. So basically, we need to be willing to let other people in, and we need to be willing to let them speak into our lives. But we need to also be willing to, like I said earlier, address our shortcomings and recognize the areas where we're lacking. This typically puts us in a position of actually giving people the authority to hurt us, you know, because being vulnerable is scary, and it gives, you know, it builds relationship with people. And the closer you are with people, the more there's a chance that they can hurt you in a deeper way.
Yeah.
But this is where trust comes in relationships. And it's so important that we're vulnerable. I know for me, this is one of the harder things, because I prefer to keep everybody at arm's length, because the further you are away, the less you can affect me and hurt me, and we'll be fine. And actually growing up, I used to kind of keep all my friends kind of at arm's length. But the thing is, I would talk with them always about their lives and be the one asking all the questions. And it worked out really great, because they like talking about themselves. So it worked out. But if they would ask me a question, I would find a way to revert it back to them. And this was so unhealthy, because then it gave me the illusion of being close to people without actually having to give any of myself for them. And that's such a selfish thing to do, to be honest. It's really selfish, because you're not giving anything to that friendship. You're just consuming. And we can't be like this in teams. You know, we can't just consume from everyone. We need to bring something to the table, and we need to bring our honesty and our vulnerability. And yeah, we need to bring our hearts to the table, you know, and allow ourselves to be seen.
And I think something with that is that we don't often see our struggles or our weaknesses as valuable.
Yep.
Or as something that we can bring. But the truth is that those things are just as much a part of us as, you know, as our strengths and the areas that we shine, and our victories. And, you know, those things are, because they are still like part of us as people and part of our like humanity and our experience, they are just as valuable in the relationship as, you know, the things that we see as important and, you know, and that maybe look better. And we're like, yeah, you can see this part of me. But yeah, the things that we struggle with are just as important and necessary in the team. Do you have anything else to add to that?
No, that's good.
Okay, cool. So next thing with vulnerability, also not my favorite thing in the world, but it's, yeah, definitely like super, super valuable in any kind of relationship. You know, you have to be vulnerable and honest. And you have to put yourself out there in a position where you can, where you can get hurt. Yeah, because that's really where you're being real, you know? Yeah, and that with that, like, part of being vulnerable is also expressing that you have needs, and that, you know, like putting your needs on the table and being honest with those as well. And also like believing this is something that like I have to have renewal in all the time, because this is actually like a whole like childhood wound that I have, that like my needs are not a burden to people. Like I always have to, even like with discipleship or something, like every time before I like ask for discipleship, I have to like it takes something like out of me to go and say like, I am having a problem with this. I need help with this. You know, it really takes like energy and like work from me to do that. But it's work that I've seen is so valuable and so important. And I've seen so much growth, like just in myself, but also like in the depth in my relationships, because I've chosen to take that step out. Yes. And that with that as well are like, you know, we need to express our needs, and we also need to allow other people to meet those needs when it's appropriate. And we also need to be willing to meet the needs of other people. You know, it's a give and a take. We can't be people that just always, you know, say like, I need this, I'm really tired, I need you to go do this for me, I need you to go do that for me, can you take this, I don't have time, you know. We can't just dump all of our stuff on everybody else. We also need to be willing to take things on from other people and to lift them up. You know, especially like us as house leaders right now. There are days when I have a lot of time and I can pick up slack from other people. But I only know that they need me to do things if they tell me. You know, I can't read their minds. But then there's also times when like, hey, you know what? I have not been home in 3 days. Can somebody else please, like, you know, organize this meal for me? Or like, can someone change my laundry for me? You know, like simple things. But if we're never willing to express those needs, then like we never have the blessing to have those met. If that makes sense. And yeah, if you have a tendency to be independent, you might not see those things as a blessing unless you experience it, you know. But it's an experience worth choosing to have. Yeah, and it's not easy at first. I don't know if it gets easier, but it is worth it. The cost of it is worth it. I'm trying to like skip through this. Mm-hmm. Yes. Another thing with vulnerability is failure and dealing with failure, because it's going to happen. Everyone is going to mess up and make mistakes on a big scale and on a small scale, on a medium scale. It's going to happen. We cannot avoid it. But the biggest thing when dealing with failure is that we have to, first of all, be willing to deal with it, and to like face it and call it out for what it is, but also to handle it with grace. You know, like we've been saying already, dealing with like, is it my place to call this out in somebody? You know, is it my place to make this correction? If it is my place, how can I handle this with grace? Because failure can be one of our greatest teaching tools, but only if we're willing to accept that we messed up, but also if we like foster it and we look at it and say like, all right, how can I grow from this? How can we grow from this? How can we like, you know, make better decisions next time? Yeah. And at least for me, like something that I was always taught was that failure is the worst, you know, like you can't fail. And if you do, like you know, like you basically have screwed up everything. But that's not true. You know, that's why we work in teams. One of the reasons why is that, you know, when somebody drops the ball on something, someone else can pick it up and can cover them. Yeah. And they, you know, have the opportunity to learn from each other. And yeah, you know, some of us fail, or like some of us like need to kind of learn by failing, and some of us learn by watching the failures of other people. And neither one is better than the other. It's just different. You know, but all of us still fail. Some of us kind of keep our failure a little bit more hidden because we don't want other people to see it. And some of us take bigger risks, and then our failure is very obvious to everyone. Yeah, but again, neither one is better than the other. They have, you know, problems, but they also have the ability and opportunity to grow. Yeah, so it's an important part of teamwork, and it's important for us to, as a team, like acknowledge those things, so that we can actually move forward from them. I think that's everything.
We want to finish for this. We did that already.
Yeah.
And then this is a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah, but I think this is a good place. I think this is the most important.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Cool. So our last little thing that we're going to talk about is trust. And this is also something that's important to have in a team. It's imperative, like we need it. Trust is a decision. It is not a feeling. And it's not something that people have to earn. I think for me, this has always been one of the hardest things to hear, is that people don't have to earn our trust. We have to decide if we're going to trust them or not. Personally, it's really easy for me to basically decide whether or not I trust people based on how I've, like, my experiences and the things that I've lived in the past before, you know? So if I've had a spiritual authority figure that was not great, or that I didn't trust because they abused that trust, then I assume automatically the next person that's in that position in my life needs to earn my trust. And unless they earn it, I'm not going to put myself in that position again to allow myself to be heard. But actually, that's not the way that we should move. We need to decide to trust. We need to choose to trust. We can't live under what someone has done, like someone else's failure, our entire lives. So at the end of the day, it's a choice. And as well, I can't just assume, like, my example of, okay, a spiritual authority did a bad thing, you know, or they betrayed my trust or whatever. So the next one has to earn it until the next person earns it. Then I'll choose to trust again. Because we always say, like, you can heal trust again, you know, like it's possible to trust again, but we think that someone needs to come and prove us wrong before we make that decision. And we can't live like that, you know, because then we're putting the failures of somebody else onto this other person who had nothing to do with that, you know? Now, of course, there are situations where people are going to let you down and abuse your trust. And I'm not saying you should go back and decide tomorrow, yes, I'm going to trust you again the exact same way that I did before and all of this.
Everything's perfect.
No.
Nothing wrong happened.
No, that is not the way, you know, because that's just denying that anything happened and repressing and, you know, all of that, which is also not good. But essentially, we need to work through that, first of all, with God, and actually acknowledge the hurt and, you know, everything that happened. And then it's going to take time, you know. I'll give you a personal example, was my dad. He and my mom got divorced when I was 13 because he had cheated on my mom. So it was not a fun scenario at all. And me being 13, I knew obviously that this is wrong. I wasn't really, you know, a really little kid anymore. Like, I had my older sister who was 15 at the time. I was 13. My brother would have been 8, and then my younger sister would have been 6. So for the two of them, my brother and my younger sister, it didn't kind of hit them as hard because they didn't understand the fullness of it. Obviously, it still hit them and it hurt them and it affected them. But, you know, they didn't understand the fullness of what all of this actually, like, meant in the moment. But for me and my older sister who did get it, like, we were angry, you know? And for me, that took away, to be honest, a lot of my trust in, first of all, my dad, but then after that, men as a whole, you know? And it wasn't like I thought men were all horrible and whatever, but there were trust issues there, especially with any men that could be potential, like, father figures, you know, like Chris, who's at our base. He's not, you know, my dad at all, but spiritually, he's a spiritual father, you know, for me. And so after my parents got divorced, I didn't talk to my dad for 8 years because I was like, no, like, this is wrong and that's that, and you're done. We're cut off. Like, you know, we're done with that. And I just kept holding on to my lack of trust. And I just stopped letting, you know, anyone in. And to be honest, I got to a point with myself where I was pretty much okay, even if I would be single my entire life. And it wasn't like I had all this, like, really active, like, anger and hate and lack of trust and whatever. Like, it was just something that was building in me subconsciously without me really spending that much time thinking about it. But because I wasn't willing to heal and I wasn't willing to choose to trust in anyone else until I felt like somebody earned that trust, this became a really big hindrance, you know, in my life and in my relationships with a lot of people. But then when I came and did my DTS here in London, one of the first things that my discipler told me was that I needed to learn how to trust people again. And that was obviously, like, I knew I had trust issues, you know, but I don't think I realized the extent of how deep they were. And it was a process, but at the same time, I had to choose to trust that they cared for me and knew what was best for me. Even if some of the things that they asked of me were, like, challenging and didn't make me feel happy clappy, you know, but I had to trust that they and God knew what I needed in that time and in that season. And now I actually have a relationship with my dad again after all those 8 years of not talking to him. I was able to actually reach out and mend the relationship with him. And I'm not going back and trusting him in the exact same way that I did when I was 13. You know, it's not going to be the same. And that's also okay. But at the same time, there's a process of healing that happened there, you know, and we're actually able to have a relationship again. And I will probably never have the exact same amount of trust in my dad now that I had when I was 13, because that trust was abused, you know? So I'm not saying we need to go and be stupid and be like, okay, you hurt me, but also I have to choose to trust. So yes, do it again, you know, like
Do whatever you
no.
want.
But at the same time, I can't take my dad's failure and his shortcoming and put that on everybody else and say, okay, but until you earn my trust, I can't trust you because this happened.
Yeah.
It's not their responsibility to fix his mistakes, if that makes sense. And we can't put that responsibility on other people. So trust is a choice, you know. I'm not saying go back and let people use and abuse you and use and abuse your trust, but I am saying that there are people that through you trusting them are going to help to heal you and are going to help to take you closer to God. So definitely choose to trust, because it's definitely worth it in the end. I don't know if you have anything extra that you want to add to that, but
No.
yes. Cool. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like this? I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's really important.
I was wondering, it's actually funny you talking about vulnerability and trust, like, because I just got done reading Brene Brown's book that was like Daring Greatly, which was like, she talks a lot about trust and vulnerability. And I think for me, like the biggest struggle for me is like understanding, I guess kind of like, you know, like the chicken and the egg, like which comes first, because she kind of touches on that a little bit, but it's also like, I think it's just kind of this thing in the air of like, I don't know if I'm vulnerable with you, then will you trust me, or do I have to trust you first to then be vulnerable with you? But I guess it kind of just depends. And I think I was just kind of wondering like what your own personal like perspective is when it comes to trust and vulnerability and that relationship between the two of them.
For me, I think the most important thing, first of all, beyond just trust and vulnerability, the first thing is when we are struggling to trust somebody, we need to forgive first. Because usually if we're not willing to trust someone initially, there's something that's happened that we still haven't fully dealt with. And for me, the first step was actually forgiveness and letting it go. And I had to actually reach out to my dad and say, you know what, first of all, like, I forgive you for everything, but also I need to accept my responsibility in this, which was that I just completely cut you out for this many years because of one thing that you did wrong, you know? So I needed to kind of come clean with my own issues in that as well. But to be honest, I don't know. I think, to be honest, they go hand in hand, you know, because if we're choosing to trust somebody, then we're choosing to be vulnerable with them at the exact same time, you know? Because if I decide that I'm going to open up and let Gabby like in and let her know how I'm doing, that means already I'm trusting her, you know? I feel like they go hand in hand together. When you choose to trust somebody, you're choosing to be vulnerable with them. You know? I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question or not, but.
So so in terms of like a new relationship or like being on a new team, like understanding, like you said, not being able to fully understand how people are, how their personality is, how they receive love, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like making the choice then, oh, this is a new environment for me. This is a new team, new people. How do I then either trust or like be vulnerable? I guess when it comes to like a new team, a new relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like, you know, even in new environments, it is a choice to trust. And to kind of start off with that foundation. But I also believe that like those things, they grow over time. They grow in the relationship. And, you know, it doesn't mean that choosing to trust that you'll just like walk into a new place and you'll just like tell them everything you've ever lived in your life. And like, you know, no. Because there's also like wisdom and discernment that comes with that. Like, yeah, and maybe it starts with like opening up with one person. Like for me in my DTS, like I was not a very open person, but with my discipler, anything that we want, like, you know, I would talk about all of it. And I had to like kind of have that one relationship like really firm, and know that I could trust her, and that if anything else went wrong during the school, like I knew that I could go back to her and talk about it, and that I even knew that she would stand up for me if I screwed up, or something like I disagreed with somebody else, that she would stand up for me and handle things on my behalf, and I saw it happen as well. Yeah, and that helped me, like having that one really solid relationship helped me obviously stay and continue to like be in the team, but also to feel safer trusting other people and being more vulnerable with other people. So it's definitely like vulnerability, while it is a choice, it's also a process, and a process of growth. It shouldn't be that you just like walk in on the day, like first day, and you're just like, blah. These are all of my problems, but yeah, it comes with wisdom too, and asking God, like, who is trustworthy here, who should I be vulnerable with? Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I don't think so. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions, concerns, comments, doubts?
Kevin's on the move.
Yes, Kevin.
I really like this class, by the way. At some point, I even thought you were talking directly to me. I forgot there's more people.
That's a lot. Me and Kevin are very similar.
No, yeah, 'cause there's some things I struggle with, or I do really often, like assuming the best out of people. I can't do that. I always assume the worst out of everything, not only people, but every situation. Because it's the easiest way. It's safer. I feel safe also.
Yeah.
And I know it's not right, but the other way hasn't proven to be right either for me. I haven't done a like long test either, to be honest. It was like a 1 week, this doesn't work, screw this, I'm gonna go back to what I'm used to.
I love the honesty.
but yeah, it's something I know I have to work on myself, especially. And trusting is a decision. Yes, I totally agree. But what if someone loses your trust? You trusting them back isn't a decision. Like, let's say Joel starts screwing up things with me. I don't know how. Okay, I like Joel, but I don't trust him anymore. It's not easy to get that trust back.
Yeah.
And I feel like I shouldn't trust him, but should I still decide to trust him? Does that make sense? Like, is it correct to decide I'm gonna trust them? Or, I mean, maybe you answered it, like maybe to not the same degree as I used to, or something like that. Never mind, then I don't have a question.
No, I think, to be honest, like, I would not just assume, sorry, we got a low battery alert, so we blacked out for a minute. No, I mean, for me, I wouldn't have the same initial degree of trust then, like, straight away, because obviously if the person abused your trust, like, there needs to be a healing process there, and that trust is going to have to grow back, essentially. In that sense, like, I think they will need to put in a little bit of extra work, at that point. But because you're in a relationship, like, there's a relationship there that you need to walk, you need to heal. Of course, we always need to try and see the other person's perspective as well, and what actually happened, and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that your trust will not be exactly the same, and at the same time, like, that's okay. We're humans. If someone hurts us, I don't think we should allow ourselves to just, okay, well, that's it, I surrender everything back to you, and like, allow them to continue abusing our trust. I think at that point it is safe to take a step back and be like, okay,
something's wrong here.
Something's wrong. I need some time, and I need to I need to have that trust, in a sense, earned back. So in that sense, yeah, I would say that it would be good for them to put in some work and try to earn it, back.
And also with the people don't have their value with what they bring to the table, basically. That's something you guys said at the beginning. I agree that that doesn't give them the value, or doesn't give them less value as a person, but maybe as a teammate or someone from a ministry. You know what I'm going? Is that true, or is it that a wrong thing I'm thinking about? Like, let's say Kelcey doesn't bring anything to the ministry at all, like useless as she can be. And I say that because I know you're not, so I feel comfortable.
It's on her bum all day.
Yeah, doesn't, and everything she does it wrong. Okay.
You guys are really finding all my redeeming qualities today. Thank you. I braid hair well.
You're a good hair braider.
That doesn't give her less value as a person, but it does to the team or to the ministry, right? Or no?
I mean, obviously, yeah. Like it doesn't take away from her value as like a human being and someone in the eyes of God. But I think I would say that is more of a like a her issue, kind of. Hear me out. That it's an issue coming from her that needs to be dealt with, and that I would say, because that's happened, like that definitely happens, that we have people that we even see the potential in them, but they aren't doing anything. Maybe they don't take initiative, they don't volunteer to do things in our context. And that's when the discipler will go to them, or Chris and Joey will go to them and say, hey, if you're not going to bring anything, then this is not the place for you. And it has nothing to do with their identity as a person, but that God has given them things and they are not being wise with how they're using those things. And maybe if to use the get of Kelcey, because she can handle it. If she's like insistent that she has to be a music track, like she is like, she's like, God has called me to be a musician. I am a musician.
No one wants
and
that.
You cannot change my mind. Pretend, please.
I know. I'm saying that no one wants that. Like, you're right. This is not
neither of us. Don't put either of us in music track, please, for the sake of everyone. But if she's like, this is my ministry, yes and amen, like, hallelujah. But she has no skill as a musician. She can't do anything, like that again is like, to put it nicely, not really nicely, that's a her problem. That's
good. Yes. I have a really similar case on why I'm Madrid. Like, not similar, exactly what you just said. But that's a problem that like needs to be addressed between maybe her and her discipler, or and we've I've been in conversations like that where we've had to say, like, we'll usually bring several people in. Maybe it's the discipler, the track leader, in the case of like a student, track leader, maybe a school leader, just to say like, hey, we notice that this is not your calling, or like this is not your strength. And in order to be like effective in ministry, like we want to put you in a place that you will actually do well and that you'll be able to grow. And also considering that, like, in the case of a DTS, that there's other students in the track probably. And, if your level is way down here and everyone else's level is way up here, like you're probably going to hold other people back from being better at it. But yeah, this is also like totally dependent on the situation and the circumstances
and whether or not there's even effort for the person to try and grow. That's a really big one. If there is effort, that's a really
a totally different situation.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope that helps, Kevin.
Yeah, I think that's it. And thank you for making so much emphasis in the part of temperament, that's not a way of like an excuse, or you can't box yourself. I know you haven't taught on it yet and you're going to, but thank you for making so much emphasis on that. I appreciate it.
Yep. My personality is not an excuse to bulldoze people. I've learned. Cool. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Carissa looks concerned. She's like, no, I don't. Cool. Well, if that's everything. Oh, no. Oh, we got one.
Grace, some people were going to judge me.
No, I was going to say, Deb was talking to me. That's why I looked confused.
Sorry, guys.
She's cooking for us.
So is it all right if we pray then before we close? Do you have anything you want to add, Carrie, before that? Are you good to pray?
That would be perfect. If you could just close this teaching out. Thank you, guys. I love this teaching. It's always so good. So if you can pray us out, that would be amazing.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, God, we just want to thank you so much just for everything that you've been speaking to us, everything that you've been showing us in this time, God. And we just want to ask, Lord, that you would bring your revelation to us on how we can work better as a team, even though we're split up right now with a literal ocean in between us, God. We want to ask, Lord, that you would help us to already start investing in each other and loving each other and embracing each other in a way that reflects your heart, God. And we want to ask as well, God, that you would, not just let this be more information or more knowledge that we have, God, but that you would actually bring it as a revelation in our hearts, God, that we would understand it in a deep way, God, that changes things. And we want to ask, God, that you would give us greater levels of grace with one another as we start to walk out this teaching. Give us grace and the patience to walk with other people, God, and to, be part of the process together. And God, we just want to ask for more of your truth, more of your wisdom as we learn how to confront situations and bring things up, with one another. God, help us to really reflect your heart, God, that people will be able to see, that we belong to you just by the way that we're embracing each other, by the way that we're walking with one another, by the way that we're handling the conflicts that arise between us, God. So we want to ask, Lord, for your wisdom as we continue to move forward. We just want to ask for greater revelation of your love and what that actually looks like. So just be with us as we continue to process the teaching with the small groups and things like that, God. And we just want to ask as well, Lord, that you would not let us leave the things that you've spoken today, God, here with today, but that you would actually help us to take them into the rest of our week as well. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, cool.
And thank you, guys.
Yes.
And ladies, we'll see you at 7:30 tonight for small groups. So see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabby and Kelcey.
See you guys.
Thank you, guys. Nice to see
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.